Hey Foundry, in case you missed it, we told you that we would be announcing to you our summer 2021 calendar, which would include the resumption of in-person indoor gatherings as part of a greater relaunch strategy. You can find that and what that entails at foundrybaltimore.com/this Sunday. But to do that and to enter that together is a Foundry-wide effort. So whether you're remaining online or you're eager to get back into this room and help us in person, or you've got some other skills or ideas we don't yet know about, go to the link at the top of foundrybaltimore.com/this Sunday and take a few minutes and fill out that form. That's going to make the most of this opportunity so that we might continue to be on mission and meet this moment well. And as always, thanks for being on mission together as a church. Historically speaking, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. Arundhati Roy said that in August of 2020, or April rather, of 2020, when several of us were maybe thinking, I know I was, that this would maybe be a short-term vacation, a little bit longer than I was comfortable with, but we'd just be waiting things out, prophetically almost, calling out the need to adapt and to think about what it meant to meet this moment, this pandemic, with a level of intention and engagement. In a world where people will very quickly just long for and call for the past, or maybe live in a paralyzing fear of the future, how do we steward this present moment as redemptive actors in the world? That's been the goal of the Foundry since March of 2020. And that's meant different things at different times, but it's always meant these two things: to be creative in our methods so that we might send a timeless message, and to be resilient in this moment because we ourselves are struggling. We ourselves are experiencing difficulty, but we are certainly entering a space and entering a moment that is just so particularly layered and hard for the people around us. And how do we be agents of restoration? By being resilient so that we might meet these things well. That's what the Deeply Formed Life has really been about for us. How do we remain creative and clinging to a timeless message, but adaptive in our methods? And how do we think strategically about what's feeding our soul for the long haul? And how do we learn how to be resilient? How do we process with the invitation of God's presence, the pain, the difficulty, the good things, the hard days, all of the things, so that we might care for those around us in a particular way? That's what the Deeply Formed Life has been about. So as we conclude this series today, again, we come to this idea of creating some inputs in our heart, in our life, in our rhythms that would help us create outputs that would meet this moment for the long haul. And in a world that is distracted, unsettled, unsure, longing for the old days, fearful or anticipatory of the future, how do we live as present and engaged people in a moment like that? John chapter 20 is our text today. And what's happened here is this group of people who have rode into town with Jesus on a donkey, seeing crowds go wild, thinking that maybe a moment was about to be ushered in, that the oppressors were going to be stamped out, that those who had come against Jesus were going to be shown what's up, that they, who were kind of a ragtag group of people, were about to come into some power and see it on display, have instead been experiencing something far different than what they thought. They see Jesus betrayed, arrested, beaten, crucified, and then taking essentially that group of people that were ready for the show and leading them to places of scattering, holed up in an upper room, isolated, distracted, divided, fearful of what's going to come next in their story. And as Jesus on that Sunday morning emerges from a tomb, not as a ghostly form, but as a resurrected Savior, he enters the space of this divided, distracted, unsettled, and uncertain group of people, which is recorded in John chapter 20, verse 19. It says this, on the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came, stood among them, and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." And with that, he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you are forgiven anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven." And there's this beautiful moment that we see here, a tender moment where Jesus, resurrected, encounters and is present with those who are unsettled, uncertain, distracted, disqualifying themselves from being part of anything. And as he enters that space through a locked door, he doesn't come in flipping over tables, screaming, "I can't believe you didn't hear the sermon that one time and you didn't connect the dots." Doesn't shame them, but brings his peace to their uncertainty. And as he brings his peace, the peace of resurrection, the peace of his presence to that, he doesn't just kind of say, "Hey, you know what? Like, now that we're all together again, can we just like sing some songs and like be real comfortable with like, this is a good thing. This is a good room. This room was full of fear and now it's full of hope." He sends them out. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. In other words, with that same sacrificial spirit and love and tenderness that Jesus embodies to a distracted, divided, and uncertain group of people, take that breath upon you and extend that out to a world that is also distracted, divided, uncertain, and weary. Jesus is inviting these disciples to experience his picture of peace, which is transcendent. It passes understanding, but then not just to bask in it, but to live as peacemakers to a distracted, divided, and weary world. And that's the challenge for us today as we think about closing this series, and in this series, The Deeply Formed Life. How do we come to a place where we can live as missional presence, as people of peace, and as peacemakers in a world that is really trying to usher in the past or is maybe just trying to get back to some kind of normalcy. And all through this series, what we've tried to do is to give us some things that would internally help us process where peace is found, how we can be in touch with that peace that Jesus is offering through the different barriers and streams of information that we're taking in. And so today I want to just channel our time together to be focused on, rather than just rushing back into a room where Jesus is bringing us some peace and we feel a sense of normalcy, how can we in this moment, as things are opening back up, as maybe you're getting back to a baseball game or you're seeing family you haven't seen in a while, or you're living that fully vaxxed best life, or whatever it is for you, how do we embody this idea of God's peace in a world that still is uncertain, is divided, and is distracted by the things that we've collectively experienced? I want to give us 4 things that we could consider together that might help us live out what the call of the church is in this moment, beyond just sitting in the room together again. Number 1, there's this call to hospitality. From the Old Testament to the New Testament, we see the call of hospitality as this transformative place where the people of God like engage and encounter others with an opportunity over a meal or through serving them to breathe the image of God into another. Joe Saxton says that the New Testament word for hospitality is this mashup of two words, one that talks about the idea of brotherly love and the other which is the word for stranger or other or foreigner. That hospitality is this place where someone who has been othered or is outside maybe our tribe is engaged with this idea of the love that we receive from God. Henry Nouwen says it differently. He says hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. And this is something we see all throughout Jesus' ministry, where it's scandalous who Jesus would dine with, who he would spend his time with, and yet it's one of the most transformational things we see take place in Jesus' ministry. And this is important for us to consider because all throughout this pandemic, we've seen this on display in our church and in our community. I'm going to talk to Jeff Thompson from 1012 Sports later in our time together, who's going to share with you specific ways that when sports leagues for young people and 1012 Sports was disrupted, that their leaders and volunteers found new ways to engage young people and create spaces of transformation, even in the middle of a pandemic. Some of you have told me that some of the best things that have happened in your story this year have been the ways in which you've engaged your neighbors. Maybe you didn't know your neighbors. They were always busy. You were always busy. But a few months of sitting around doing nothing have created some spaces over bonfires and grills or on one's back deck to another or from the roof deck across two roof decks where you've been actually able to connect. And some of you have even told me that, one of your fears of this world that just kind of opens back up is some of the work that you've done to build those relationships you don't want to lose. And I think it's so important for us to remember to take some things like this with us, to take the spirit of hospitality with us into this new moment. Some of you have made meals and kept our freezer at the church stocked for people you never met and you don't know who have experienced COVID or food insecurity or quarantine or some kind of grief or loss. And we've been able, because of your generosity, to drop off a meal. But what will hospitality look like for you in this season? Maybe it's meeting someone for coffee and catching up or initiating a text or keeping a friendship on your block alive even as you go down to the ocean, hon, or you get back to Camden Yards or whatever it might be for you. May this be something that we continue to embody as a church and not just be like a thing that was kind of a cute novelty when we couldn't be busy in other ways. Second, that we would consider what it means to be missional presence in a divided and distracted world by the way that we engage justice. We love Micah 6:8 here at the Foundry, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God as this call for what it means to be a follower of Jesus. But we lose in our own, many times, just busyness, distraction, maybe even our own anger or frustration about the things that are going on. We might lose sight of what a picture of justice actually looks like. The Old Testament the word for justice is mishpat, which is not just punishing the bad guys or holding the bad guys accountable or the oppressor accountable. It's, as Tim Keller says in Generous Justice, to give people what they are due, whether punishment or protection or care. And something that's very possible for us is, just as our lives were maybe really busy in March of 2020, where we were distracted and not particularly able to think about some of the things that were going on in our world that were harmful or robbing of flourishing, that we might now have really good intentions, but not acquaint ourselves to the need and the call for the people of God to remain engaged in works of justice. justice. And friends, if we can't do that as a church, I don't know where else on the planet is a better place, than the church of Jesus Christ coming together, refining and helping one another. Because the reality is, I think sometimes we hear this call to justice and we think it's this call to be Batman, like to be this vigilante kicking down the doors of all of the systems and structures or bad things that are happening in the city and around us. And that's, unfortunately, that just like overloads us. It's like drinking through a fire hose. It's like, okay, I can't do anything to make a dent, so I do nothing. So if you like the superhero analogy, may I then present that what we're actually called to be as a church is the Avengers, a complement of people with skills and abilities and strengths and weaknesses that see and enhance one another because we're better together and we can see the picture more fully. And you have something to offer that conversation. Your presence matters in that conversation, so that we're not just left to one person's picture of justice, which is so corruptible by my own pain, my own busyness, my own grind. We're called to be people who embody the presence of God and the peace of God in our places of work. That what we don't have as a church is a sacred secular divide where there's like the professional Christians and there's everyone else kind of grinding it out till the next time the stream comes on. Every one of us is called to embody the hope that we have in the places in which we express ourselves, through vocation, through gifts and skills and abilities, compensated or not, right? Some of us are students. We're not being compensated right now. Some of us might be between jobs, but it doesn't mean that we're doing nothing. Some of us might be retired or staying home with children, and so we don't get a W-2, but we've got all kinds of things vying for our attention, sun up to sundown. Some of us are doing that, and we're still getting on the Zoom call, trying to mute strategically so that flatulence doesn't make it into the big business meeting. Or some of us we're at the water cooler, we're traveling again. I don't know what it is for you, but I would invite you to consider the reality that the hours that you spend doing that thing are not separated from, they don't rob you from the opportunity to embody mission. That rather they become the crucible by which the mission of God is carried out, both in the ways in which you interact or engage people, but maybe the things in which are entrusted to you as a result of the efforts and energy you put forth. Skye Jethani says that really the call to see work as mission moves us from vocational narcissism to vocational generosity. What do we mean by that? That most of us, as a talking point, talk about what we do from the image of our identity. Right? I do this, and this is what makes me feel like I'm making an important indentation in the world, that I'm somebody, that I'm something. But if we understand the gospel transforms our picture of work, and as we receive the peace of Jesus, it moves us to be peacemakers even in our places of employment, that it moves us to say, how can I live generously as a result of this opportunity, both with my coworkers or maybe with the thing I'm entrusted to do, or perhaps even just with the resources that the role entrusts to me, or the time that I have as a result of what I do to be able to be generous to people around me. I think about this in a time where I worked at an insurance company. I was a file clerk back in an era where the storage of all the things was not computer based, but rather these paper copies sitting in the annals of history somewhere. And what I loved about that job was that it was a real flexible job. I could work whenever I wanted. I could leave my headphones in, interact with nobody, and go be about my band, which is what I really wanted to do that summer. And it was great about that role. What I appreciated about that role was that I could do that thing. It afforded me that opportunity. But I began to feel convicted and convinced that if I was going to go sing songs about what it meant to have hope in the middle of a grind, I needed to not just have a grind, but actually interact with other people who may have felt hopeless. And so the call for me was to think strategically at that work about not not just how quickly could I clock in or clock out, but how could I be present, even though I was only going to be there for a short time with the people around me, that I could hear more of their story and they could hear mine. Lastly, we think about the idea of proclamation. The idea that what we don't just want to be is people who are rushing around, busying ourselves, serving others without any opportunity to talk about the hope that we have, but that we do have the opportunity to do what 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15 says, to be prepared in season and out of season to give an answer for the hope that we have. But to do that with gentleness and respect, which is the piece that so many times people lose sight of in their quest for the truth bomb, their quest for the soundbite. What I love about that passage is that it's this really good, tangible reminder for me of what my therapist says is grace and truth over time. That we get an opportunity to not just win arguments about the credibility of the scriptures or resurrection or what a church should be doing right now in terms of gathering, but that we could be people of hope in a time that feels anxiety-ridden, hopeless, where the recovery is not going to look the same for everyone, where the collective trauma is real and is going to manifest itself in all kinds of ways, that we get a chance with our ears, but also with our mouth, to speak words of hope in hopeless and desperate and difficult situations. Foundry, the best witness that we are going to have as a church this summer is not great music. It's not bringing the coffee back to the corner. It's not just how good the live stream quality is or the platforms we use. It is the transformed and present lives of people like you being willing to speak words of hope into the lives of people as they express to you their feelings of hopelessness, or to be honest about our own struggles, where we struggle to bring the hope of Christ to bear in the midst of the situations that we find ourselves in. Your words become an opportunity to season with salt the difficulties and struggles of our time. We are invited in Christ to experience a transcendent peace that's available to you today, that selfless sacrifice of Jesus that can be a better source of hope than the return to an old normal or everything going our way this summer. But what's more is that we are invited to be peacemakers, present pictures of hope in the middle of the divisions and distractions of this moment. Today, as we receive communion, may it remind us of the Savior who's present with us right now, will engage our questions, will engage our fears, and will engage our struggles, but will breathe on us and challenge us to leave our walls and be a picture of hope to the world. May we receive that and extend it today.